Thanks, Oliver. Everybody had lunch. You're all ready for your after lunch nap. Not gonna let you do that. I've brought some key speakers with me. So yeah, I'm working at DAU-UP. For those of you who still don't know, we're one of the largest companies in the industry who deals with user acquisition for mobile and social games, definitely in terms of ad spend wise. Actually been to Casual Connect many times before, all over the world, but it's actually my first time on the stage, so I'm excited. And in order to pass it through, I really brought some key speakers or key specialists, you a marketing specialist from the industry. Adam, would you like to present yourself?
Sure. Hey guys, my name's Adam Jaffe. I'm the VP of Marketing at SocialPoint. I've been in the gaming space for almost 8 years. And before SocialPoint, I was the VP of Growth at SGN. And prior to that, I was at Playtika, one of the original members of that company.
Hi, I'm Noga. I'm from Playtika, Director of Marketing of Sodomania. That's Playtika's flagship product. And I've been in the industry for about 4 years.
Hi, I'm Saikala. I work for Miniclip as a user acquisition specialist. A lead user acquisition team for cross-platform or mobile. We have loads of games, as you know, probably around 900 or something like that across web and mobile. My background is social casino gaming at Plan B before. That's where I launched my career about 3.5 years ago. And right now we are breaking records at Miniclip.
Cool, so I'm sure you all know them professional-wise, but here's some interesting facts about each one of them. Adam came to Israel basically not to work in the industry. He basically came to Israel as a soccer striker, and he was playing for a while there. And I guess the rest is history. Noga, I found it back actually like 2 days ago. Noga we used to live in Africa for a while, in Angola, if I remember correctly. And she speaks Portuguese. She hasn't been practicing for a while, so if any of you here in the crowd like speaking Portuguese, she would love to practice it. And Saikala, well, many interesting things to say about Saikala, but I think probably the most interesting thing is Saikala. I mean, she does a lot of things, but she was not able to ride a bicycle basically till a year ago, and now she can. That's it, guys. So we've been speaking among ourselves, trying to bring something valuable to all the game developers. By the way, how many game developers are there here in the crowd? Nice. And how many like dealing with user acquisition or marketing in general? Perfect. So definitely we want to bring something from the huge amount of experience that all of us have here. I guess we can speak one day about user acquisition and reactivating and engaging players, but we really try to coverage the entire topics. So we'll try to touch each one of them, and obviously we'll try to leave some room at the end for you to ask some questions. So probably I would say the most common question, which definitely I get to hear a lot from definitely new game developers, is okay, I have now a great game. I have developed a great game, and now what? Now what do I do with it? How do I launch it? Can I rely on just on free users? Do I need to do some kind of a paid acquisition activity? What's your approach, guys?
I don't know what to no. Okay, Miniclip is quite fortunate. We have a lot of cross-promotional traffic that we can use on .com, mobile, other apps, and pages on Twitter and Facebook, and other things. We also buy traffic as well via mobile networks, Facebook mobile app installs, etc., etc. So I think all of these things are important. And you need to remember that there is a marketing mix for a reason. You need to get some of the cross promos, some of the organic traffic, package your product with lots of features, so then Apple and Google can help you feature the product as well. But at the same time, it is very important to include the paid traffic into it as well. So it really depends depends on all of that mixed together, and the budget, of course.
So Playtika is also quite fortunate. We have a lot of money. So our strategy is usually to start very strong. And what we do is also, like Hala said, we cross-promote from other apps, but we also buy incentivized traffic when our target is actually to reach the top charts and get a lot of organic traffic out of it. Once we've done that, it's a lot easier for us to measure the KPIs and see what the strategy should be for the app as user acquisition moving on forward.
So maybe I'll talk a little bit differently from a person or perspective of somebody who doesn't have any of those things, money or cross-promotion capabilities. And I think the first thing that's most important about running marketing is to understand your users, trying to figure out where these guys are coming from and why they're playing your game, and then starting to leverage that in order to push them to actually become promoters of your game. So starting small, marketing is probably the best way for most of you guys to at least get the first KPIs of your game. Okay, we've launched in a country, soft launch in Canada, New Zealand, games which replicate your core markets. Maybe it's a French title, so you're going to, I don't know, someplace that predominantly French without actually targeting your core base. And doing sort of targeted buys. Places like Facebook are good since you can get very specific to your audience, and then seeing how those guys react in your game. And most importantly, to find out what points they're most likely to then promote your game to other people. Because let's be honest, most people, they don't have millions of dollars, they may have 100,000. So you can't go off and run a burst campaign for a launch. You want to buy slowly. So the advice that I give people mostly is buy for profitability. So if you know that your LTV is $1 per user, then buy at that dollar. And as the game continues to grow and the LTV grows based on features that you integrate into your game, then you can increase your spend. But there's not a huge benefit, in my opinion, to going massive if your budget doesn't, if you don't have the money to take that hit in case it doesn't work.
And you all share the same opinion? I mean, do you think it's worthwhile to launch a game first on a test market, or would you go straight ahead to your most valuable market?
So you always have to start in a test market. You have to make sure that your tracking is correct and working, and that all the post-install events are working, and that you can, and you also measure the KPIs. So you have to make sure that everything works before you spend the money on launching an app. So we would usually start with a small market. It can be a European market or Canada, and then we would launch in the US.
So I totally agree with that as well. Launching in a small market is important for two reasons. Obviously, as Noga already mentioned, to understand your KPIs. And on that point, that is probably the most important thing about soft launching, to really understand what your game is doing with the kind of traffic you're bringing in. It's also very important to note what kind of traffic you bring into that game. For instance, if you soft launch in a country and then you run a bunch of incent traffic and you see your KPIs, they may look different than if you buy Facebook, or if you're getting organic, or if you're getting cross promotion. So if it's your first time, I suggest that you try and mimic the kind of traffic that you're bringing into your application with the kind of traffic you're going to use for your launch. Otherwise, maybe Facebook is your main source of traffic, and as we know, Facebook has very good users, and so you see your day one retention is 60% and you're over the moon, and then you launch that game and you realize, well, actually it's closer to 30% because the traffic of organic users is typically a little less. This can greatly affect the profitability of your game and your buys. So,
I think in this case, what we normally do, we have a mix of both during the soft launch. Let's say we launch in Canada, or if the US is the main target market for the global launch, or we go into some European markets, or whatever, something small. We make sure that we include both Facebook as a performance side, but also network traffic as well. Small mix of incent, but then non-incent as well. So that way you can have different tiers of KPIs. Let's say if you're testing service stability, retention, engagement of the game, and then monetization afterwards, monetization meaning in-app purchases. So all of those tiers would have a different benchmarks. So during soft launch, we usually get a sample of each group.
Speaking of that, I mean, what would you advise game developers to do? You've mentioned, Adam, you mentioned Facebook. When you're launching a game, would you say that to run as many channels as possible, or to focus on just a few of them? Mainly Facebook, for example.
So for us, right after the launch, we would start only with a few channels to make sure that we can optimize and also make any changes in product if needed. And then slowly you can increase and add additional channels. It wouldn't be wise to start with several channels because it's really hard to control, and each channel you have to optimize and do a lot of analytics to make sure that you optimize on all levels. And once you feel in control with every channel, you can add different sources and check if it's Facebook or ad networks or any other type of channels that you want to test.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that the burst campaign, as we've all know, you launch with a lot of traffic. It's a strategy. Personally, I haven't found it to be effective in the last year. In certain markets, it's more effective. For instance, in the U.S., I never found it to be. It's also the amount of money that you need to spend to do that is significantly outweighs the benefit that you receive. But in smaller markets, for instance, in Asia, burst campaigns are the main source of traffic for new games. In fact, if you guys have spoken to any of the guys here talking about launching, probably the first thing they're talking about is what kind of campaign you're going to run in those first weeks, and they should be big campaigns. Because in those countries, they have more concentrated sources. You can go with one partner and reach the top for $30,000, $40,000, whereas in the US, you're looking at $300,000 or $400,000 to get there. So, as Noga mentioned, small assortment of channels, optimization is the key to move forward.
Well, oh, sorry, Sai.
It's fine. I kind of agree with everything that you guys said because we do the same thing. Most important, test, and everything you test, make sure you track, record everything, analyze, do it again.
We'll go back to burst in a sec. I think it's something that we're speaking about and probably interesting for all of us. But let's say one of the challenges that everybody's facing, especially when they're launching a new title, I mean, everybody wants the high quality players on the lowest acquisition costs. But seriously, guys, there's no magic out there. So how let's say for a new game developer or for a new title even, what's the best way to set a reasonable paid acquisition cost per player?
That's a tough question. I think a lot of it has to do with how you've done your soft launch. Muli, do you need to take that? No, okay. Sorry about that. So depending on how your game, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of companies who do soft launches, and they, in this time period, are benchmarking their CPIs as well. So particularly if you're running Facebook, you should know more or less your conversion rates. It's a good time to test art, creative. These are usually the key factors in terms of your CPIs. What price you should set? I mean, it typically starts a new game. People want to see it. If it's got good art, you'll get lower CPIs. As you start to scale, that CPI will climb accordingly. So it's a question of how quickly you want to get new users. If you want 100,000 users in the first week, so you could look to spend in the US $3, $4 an install. If you only care about 5,000, okay, you could do it for 80 cents. I've heard of people getting even as low as 50 cents on Facebook for high quality traffic. It really just depends on the kinds of users, the kind of art, and again, the testing that you've done beforehand.
I think nowadays mobile networks, including social channels like Twitter and Facebook, have become quite transparent and compatible and competitive as well. And CPIs could be CPIs are negotiable. So what we normally do during soft launch, let's say we run in soft launch and we try to figure out what kind of CPIs are achievable and realistic, and how can we monetize the game on both in-app purchases and then advertising side of things. Then we work out the LTV model, including the retention, re-engagement, and everything that we can, all the KPIs into it, and then package it and see what realistically can we achieve in, I don't know, 6 months, 12 months, 9 months, whatever, however you calculate it. And then see that if you want to make a 10% ROI profit after 6 months, then this is anything that's lower than that could be profitable. And you work out. And it's really a game-by-game scenario, because let's say in Playtika, you guys pay probably a lot higher CPIs than we do. We can't afford to pay that. So we go back to networks and we optimize our Facebook traffic according to what we can afford to stay profitable.
So another strategy is actually you need to know if you want to gain market share, and then the CPIs could be pretty expensive, but actually CPIs are rising. So you also know that if you will wait and start very slow next year or during the year, the CPIs will increase. So it's really a matter of strategy if you want to be ROI positive in a certain time, like Saikala said, or if you want to gain a market share, and then you might be willing to pay even higher CPIs than the LTV that you gain. And also it's a matter of the organic traffic that you get out of the paid installs. So you have to measure all the time the ratio between organic installs and paid installs, and then you can make sure that, like, if every paid install brings you 2 organic installs, you can calculate differently the CPI that you're willing to pay. So don't forget that part.
Yeah, I just want to add one other thing. The optimization, all of these things are important, and the soft launch phase and everything, these are the key times for you to understand your game and the prices that you can pay. And obviously, guys like Suf and DAU-UP, there are hundreds of networks out there that would love to take your traffic, or sorry, to take your money and to buy media for you. But unless you've done the things that we've mentioned here previously, that legwork to understand your price points, your organic to paid ratio, all of these things, you'll be in a world that you basically don't understand. And for me as well, the first thing I'm doing is understanding how much I can pay, because when I go to him and I say, hey, I want to run a campaign, he goes, great, $3 CPI. I say, no, I know my game converts it like this, so you're gonna pay $1.50. So I make him sweat a little bit, but I also know that my game, this is what it can do. So it's important.
True, Adam. And you've mentioned before burst campaigns. Are you using burst campaigns as part of your marketing activity? I think it's one of the questions that people still don't quite know whether if it's effective or not. Are you doing that as part of your activity?
So we are in certain markets. I mentioned Asia, particularly in Asia, because incentivized traffic is basically the only traffic you can buy. I think something like 80% of all traffic purchased in Japan is incentivized. It's even higher in Korea. I think it's closer to 90%. So you're very limited if you're looking for velocity, if you want to get a lot of users in quickly. Plus, in those regions, the concept of incentivized traffic differs greatly from what you would see in the Western world. For instance, most people understand that to get a game, you're going to get something in another game. So it's almost expected to receive something for free. And it actually acts more like regular traffic, regular non-incent traffic. I'm not going to say it's amazing, but it's better than, say, your general incent traffic that you might be paying 20 or 30 cents through Tapjoy or Fiverr, one of those companies. But as I mentioned before, in the US, the cost is very prohibitive, and you got to be careful because Apple does not like rank manipulation. One of the companies that I'm very familiar with, they just got hit by that, running with a company basically offering, hey, for 40 grand, we get you to #1. And I strongly suggest that if you guys are getting emails like that, you let them go, because it's not worth it.
So burst campaigns are pretty tricky. I have to say that usually before we run a burst campaign, I don't sleep that well. You know that you're going to spend a lot of money and you're not sure what the return is going to be. So, and if Apple changes something in their algorithm, or Google, you can see not great results. So you have to start very small, like pick a country where the burst campaign won't cost you too much. And I agree with Adam, you have to be very careful on iOS and make sure that the company that's going to run the burst is compliant with all of iOS regulations. And make sure that it works for you, calculate the organic lift, and see if the CPI actually backs out for you. And if not, just don't run burst campaigns, and definitely don't try an adventure of running a burst campaign in the US or another large country without doing any tests before.
At Miniclip, we do run bursts. Our titles are very generic and wide audience appeal. So it's quite regular. We don't do it for existing titles. We do it for new titles. But again, at the same time, with whatever you guys said already, during the soft launch, we do small bursts and see what can we do in a smaller place, and is it feasible? Is it going to be profitable? Because then we can work out the ratio, what organic uplift we get over that time on the back of the paid traffic, and try to estimate and calculate our return later on with larger countries like US. We're quite big in UK as well, and all over Europe.
So I just have one more point. Sorry, I keep adding on at the end of these things. It really depends if you're going to go iOS or Android as well. So for instance, the algorithm of iOS, basically, for whatever anybody tells you, it downloads. That's what the highest number of downloads gets #1. So if you're the #1 downloaded game, you'll be at the top spot. Google doesn't work the same way. It takes more of a historical reference point. So if you're launching a game initially, I mean, we did this in the United States, and when we started running the campaign, by the time, it took us, I think, almost 2 weeks of massive amounts of traffic in order to reach that position. And you rank much slower and much more gradually in Google. That being said, the only caveat to that is that Google has a category which is new free games, which operates more or less like the category, or sorry, the algorithm of iOS. But it only lasts for the first 30 days when you actually launch your app. So if you are planning to do a burst campaign for Google, you just need to take in mind that you've got 30 days from the time that app goes live, unless you're using Google's beta testing product, from that app going live to the time that you can actually utilize that top free new game section. And in some countries, that works really well, particularly in Asia.
Also, rumors say that Google take into account users that uninstall your app. So if you buy incentivized traffic for Android, and many of those users will uninstall the app right after they install it, you can have a negative effect on your app. So you have to be very picky about the sources that you will use for incentivized campaign or a burst campaign on Android.
That's a good point. And actually, on the incentivized part, you don't necessarily need to incentivize the install, right? You can incentivize downstream events like tutorial completion or reaching a certain level, and you can actually make that incent traffic mimic that of organic traffic. It's a way of sort of manipulating exactly the user. I wouldn't say manipulating as such, but it sounds a little bit too negative, but pushing them a little bit further down the funnel for your benefit.
What about acquiring incent traffic without doing burst campaign, like on an ongoing basis? I mean, do you see any value of that?
I see value of that as a sustaining the chart positioning, so you can kind of stick around at the top 10 or top 25, wherever you want to be, for a little bit longer, or maybe forever. That would cost a lot. But yes, I definitely see a point in doing that, because it's gonna, because you are acquiring less volume, it's not gonna cost, CPI cost is not gonna be as high. So normally you would pay for like this big burst, something in the US, maybe 150 CPI for incent traffic. But then if you get a smaller volume, you can get it as cheap as 20, 50 cents. So it's worthwhile because it's gonna back up and return anyway.
So yeah, I agree with that. I think that for us in general, the only way we buy incent traffic is to very, very, very small price. I think the minimum bid you can possibly put on the networks is what we put down. And we've actually found that if you combine that with deep engaged users, so for instance, you're putting the price point not on the open or the install, but you're putting it on, as I mentioned, tutorial completion or reaching level 2 or reaching level 6, something that can happen in the first or even second session, but isn't so far down that the user would never do it. You get a pretty good, a pretty good lift. Not to mention, there are a lot of people that don't necessarily ever get to that second point, so you're getting even a lower eCPI than you would generally get from other kinds of incent just by opens.
So you can pay really low prices on incent, like it can even go down to 10 cents. And then if you optimize the publishers, the traffic source that you work with, if you optimize like a very, very specific whitelist of publishers that you run on 10 cents, you might be able to back out with the incentivized traffic, but it's tricky, and you have to monitor it and stay hands on the incentivized campaign, because you might see all of a sudden additional traffic sources that will start buying your traffic, and it's not sure that it will be that great.
Just to make sure that we're all on the same page here too, we're talking, there's basically two kinds of incent traffic that you can purchase, right? One is you're incentivizing somebody to actually perform an action in your game. The second is incentivized or rewarded video, as you probably all have been hearing a lot in this conference. So these are two very different kinds of traffic sources. One is very tricky, as Noga said, and it can burn you very quickly. The other is arguably one of the best sources outside of Facebook. So, and they both operate differently. They both look and feel different when you're talking about the users who engage in them. So just
the difference is on the video, the user is incentivized just to view the video, but is not incentivized to download the app. So if a user chooses to download the app, it's because he really wants it, and and it's after he saw a video, so he tends to be more engaged than a user that hasn't seen a video before. downloading the app.
Cool. So we've launched a game, hopefully successfully. Let's now move to maybe to the next challenge. How do I grow my daily active user? I mean, is it just a matter of Noga, I don't know, being in your position, being aggressive and I don't know, just buy as much as you can, or is there another way to basically grow your DAU?
So we grow our DAU by many contacts with the users. So we have a very engaged fan page on Facebook, for example. We have almost 15 million people that are following the Slotomania fan page. So we keep on posting them. We have a lot of promotions inside the game, and every day something interesting is happening. So when we keep on posting them about the things that are happening, they find it interesting and they come back to play. Other than that, every other tool that I'm sure you are familiar with, push notifications, emails, retargeting ads, all those have a lot of effect on the retention of the users. And it's also a matter of product. So if you see that you're doing all this and the retention is still low, you might need to change some things in the product.
Yeah, it's as Noga said, it's all about customer relationship management as CRM, as we all know. All of these tools are available, and I think the main point here is to remember that you track everything and record it and see the impact and see all of these efforts, even though you don't need to pay CPI or whatever cost that you do. You need to make sure that you measure everything and see the impact and see what works. A/B test things. If you send an email, if you send a push notification, after-use notification via Facebook or any other channel, or even retargeting ads, A/B test creatives, A/B test placement, A/B test everything, and see how it works per country, and whatever other segmentation that you can do.
Is there a limit to what you can grow? I mean, all of you share the same challenge or the same experience of growing a mature app. Is there a limit to what you can grow? For example, is there like a daily limit to the amount of users you can get?
No, and there's also no time frame for it either. Meaning that I've seen apps which have been live for a year, and then all of a sudden they just pop off in one country. Something happens, and the game just goes. I mean, I have promoted. Obviously, in the beginning of Slotomania, when I joined, it was growing at an insanely fast rate. As actually DAU-UP can attest as being one of the very first people to help us promote that game. And also with the games that I currently promote, we have a massive amount of organic traffic that just comes in because of users promoting that game. So as the ladies mentioned, CRM is paramount to that, but also to push out messages from the game to other users, incentivizing them, not necessarily through things in the game, but saying, hey, if you have more friends, you will get more benefits, obviously helping you with buildings and other things, and that's the best way to grow DAU, other than television, which we can talk about later.
We'll get to that soon, Adam, about television. We want to hear your past experience. What about new markets? I mean, obviously it's part of your strategy to grow the game. Like, how would you suggest to do it? I mean, when is the right time to do that? Which markets you should choose?
So we constantly monitor our organic installs in different markets, and we check if we see high RPs, average revenues per install, in markets that we're not promoting actively on. And if we see that a market brings great quality and the traffic is good, then we can definitely start buying in that market, and we will aim to reach the CPIs according to the revenue per user that we see in that market.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, for us, we focus on where the money comes from. I mean, revenue drives most of the decisions made from my marketing team. That being said, there are other reasons to be big in other markets. If you know that you have an investor that has positioned himself in one particular space, you may want to go there and be big in that market. Maybe not necessarily for profit, but for other purposes, branding and whatnot. So it depends on the strategy of your game, whether it's to be the biggest in the United States and knowing that there's revenue to be made there, or whether it's to be the biggest in Germany because you've got a partner there that you wanna impress?
With us as Miniclip, it's all revenue driven. So with in-app purchases and advertising as well. Most of the time, a simple use case I could tell you, I started testing a few weeks ago. We never bought any traffic in Middle East or Asia, and we did quite a lot of tests in Western Europe and some of the other parts of Europe, and we're quite big in North America. So it's like, okay, let's go to good old App Annie. Let's check our revenue and see. I identified 4 countries in Asia and 4 countries in Middle East, went and started buying traffic. Now it's performing really well. We're getting some revenues, really cheap CPIs, even on Facebook. Yeah, let's give it up. Done.
So there's one other thing too. I mean, most of you guys probably have very small acquisition teams, I'm assuming. Sorry if you have massive teams, and they're awesome. But one of the things that I recommend that you do is, if you guys yourselves don't have the capacity to do that, to go in, because each one of these markets is siloed, right? The thing you do in the US, it's not going to affect what's going on in Canada. It's going to affect what's going on in Mexico. Maybe a little bit, but generally speaking, not so much. I recommend that you go to somebody that you trust, a good media buyer, like DAU-UP or one of the many other ones out there, and say, listen, I want you to buy for profitability for me, blank check to go wherever you want, blank check, blank canvas. You can go to the US, you can go to Russia, find me the users and where the quality lies. And as long as you've got the right tracking set up, you should be able to see, they found this quality pack of users in this country, maybe it makes sense for us to go. Particularly if your game is new and you don't have the KPIs to say, hey, Russia is already really great for us, we should be there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are engaged and paying users all over the world, right? It's just a matter of how to put your hands on them on the reasonable acquisition cost. Let's go a bit about to maybe reactivation activity. I think it's something that comes up more and more. Is there any value to invest on reactivation activity, especially on your churn users? I mean, not necessarily about your, let's say, former engaged players, but for those who have played a game a bit and then decided it's not their game.
So Slotomania has a base of more than 100 million users that downloaded the app. Obviously, a lot of them are not active on a daily basis. So a game like this, similar, that has such a huge database, it's a huge opportunity for us to target our users that installed the app a few years ago and haven't played since then. The app has completely changed and a lot of new things are there, so it's like a new game for them. And if we reach out to them with a retargeting ad, we can reactivate them, and the price for reactivation would be a lot lower than a CPI for acquiring a new user.
For us at Miniclip, there's definitely a big point in doing that. Users churn over time. There is a churn rate. There is in 7 days, 15, there is 30, and then 90 days, and so on, and it goes on. It's about, for us, it's about analyzing, make sure which user cohorts are actually worth reaching out again to. So let's say somebody downloaded an app and they played only once, and then got out straight away and never came back. So maybe it just wasn't for them. So maybe we will not target them. But the immediate effect for us would be anyone who did play and had some sort of engagement and maybe spent some money as well, maybe $1 or $2, we'll definitely come back to them via various channels that are available out there right now to go and retarget them either on Facebook or Twitter, or go via Top Commerce, Kriti, or Emerge, or whatever, one of them, and target them with IDFAs and Google Advertising IDs and say, by the way, you haven't been in our 8-ball pool game. Let's check out the new QZ's powers. Let's do that. And with nowadays, with all the capabilities that there are, deep linking and all the tracking that is available, it's totally worth it. And it's going to be always, as you said, less than the CPI's cost.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think today, with the technology that exists, retargeting should be a strategy that you roll out with immediately. I mean, you're going to have guys coming in day one. Most people would say that 60% day one retention is a fantastic number, and that's a game that you can build a company on. But that means that for every $1 you spend, 40 cents of it goes out the window immediately. And retargeting or re-engagement, or whatever you want to call it, the strategy of push notifications, email marketing, retargeting ads to the companies that they've just mentioned are important pieces to just continue to extend your network and your touch on these players. Because the reality is that the barrier to entry for them to move to another game is basically zero. So you being present in those places is important. And there's another piece that can be successful for that, which is that because when you go out and market, how your ads are shown are typically based off of the eCPM. That's how the publisher says which ads they should show versus somebody else's. So typically if somebody's engaged user in your game, they're more likely to click on your ad than say a competitor. So if you have a very good set of users, for instance your VIPs, what you might do is create a segment for them, and basically they always see your ads wherever they go. So you know they're going to click on them because they're your best engaged users, and basically you're sort of guarding them across the internet in a sense. So if they're going to click on an ad, it's going to be my ad because it's going to work for me every time. They're going to come back into my game, and I know that my conversion rate is better than Dragonland or Dragon Vale or one of these other companies.
Maybe you can share with the audience a bit of the tools you have today for reactivating your users, and I don't know, even taking into consideration the paid tools versus the free tools. And maybe share about your experience of like how much you're doing it paid versus, I don't know, in-app notifications or game or page management, which obviously helps to re-engage users back.
So first I want to say regarding the tools, many companies don't measure actually the retargeting ads that they run. And those that do measure it don't take into account that some of the users would come back to the game anyhow without running any retargeting ads. So what we do, and it's very important for us, is we split the users into a test group and a control group, and we measure the lift of the retargeting campaign. And that way we don't measure every revenue from the campaign, we just measure the lift, and that brings us to a real ROI analysis of the retargeting campaigns. So it makes your life a bit more difficult, but it's worth it because you can by that really know what you're doing. And regarding the tools that we use, we mainly use Facebook currently for retargeting ads. There are many other tools out there, like Kala said, many other companies that run the retargeting ads, but you need to find what works best for you and to measure it constantly and make sure that you're not just spending money on retargeting that doesn't bring you a positive ROI.
Actually, Noga, you've recently launched a loyalty program in all of your apps. Can you share with us a bit of your experience and insight? I mean, does it help to reactivate or maintain the users?
So currently, each app of Playtika has a loyalty program. It's something that Slotomania has for a long time now. We have several tiers, and users are approached by the tier that they belong to. And that's also how we retarget them. But what Suf is actually referring to is a new program that we just launched on Slotomania last week, which we combined all the loyalty programs of all games under one loyalty program. So it's a bit too early to say how it's working for us. But in general, loyalty programs are definitely a great way to retain users.
So based on what Nogo just mentioned about, well, the various tools, at Social Point we use a variety of different companies, obviously Tab Commerce, AppLovin, some of the DSPs out there like Managed can all do retargeting for you depending on the exchanges that they're plugged into. Some have better or poorer reach. We obviously use Facebook, custom audience, you've got Twitter and iAd, all of these companies can do it, and some of them are more beneficial because they've got isolated audiences. For instance, you can't necessarily access the inventory of iAd through Manage.com, but Manage.com has access to Outfit 7 versus somebody else who doesn't necessarily have that directly. So it depends on the reach, who you're trying to go for, where you think your users are most likely to be. And in general, the strategy for us is, well, we're just getting started on it. I mean, we have a long-term plan for this, but to be honest with you guys, it hasn't been something that we've been focusing on too heavily in the last couple of months.
I'd like to add one more thing to it because I really am excited to hear about your loyalty program and looking forward to trying it. But also, we shouldn't forget about new users. We should have a lot of apps out there nowadays. They have a first few days new user funnel when every day you come back, you get some sort of gift or incentive or free coins or anything like that. That's really important because the first week of the new user, once they install your game for the first time and play, those are the crucial, that's a crucial week. You either they're gonna stick with you for a while or maybe forever, or they might just, uninstall the game. So anything you can do within the first week, do it.
Let's go into some of general questions. We don't have much time. Before we leave the question to the end, there's a few questions that I have in general. You all have large marketing teams internally. One of the questions I've get to being asked quite often is, what's the value of using an external company for doing marketing activity? What's your approach? I mean, what's your approach? What's your strategy? What's the value of using external versus internal efforts?
Okay, I'll go first. Internally and externally, it's very important. Okay, you can do everything in-house. You've got this UA army and marketing and CRM and everything. But how do you know if you kick ass or not? If you don't compare yourselves with someone else who can also kick ass. So it's more of in-house and us, but we just like to keep a competition going and see whatever we can do in-house, can somebody else do it? And maybe, I don't know, week to week, week by week, let's say, work with you guys, and 1 week you kick our ass and we go, we're going to go and optimize a bit better and run some more tests. I think competitive edge is always good.
Yeah, I agree with that. Personally, I like to have everything in-house. The team that we have, I don't like the idea of paying somebody else to understand my game when I don't necessarily get to use that knowledge for the next game or in a meeting or a one-on-one conversation I might have with that person. That being said, I agree 100% that for a benchmarking tool, going with a third party is paramount. And that being said, a lot of people don't have the capacity to roll out those kinds of campaigns. So to take a good example is how we use DAU-UP today. So we use them in a sort of an exploratory capacity. We say, hey, you got these markets. We don't necessarily have time to do them, but we find that they're valuable for us. Please go out and try and make that happen.
So I also agree, and I think that it's really important to run traffic in-house. But it's also important to always run with external partners, not only for benchmarking, but also because the external partners, that's their core business. So that's what they breathe and that's what they do. And they would be the ones that would be most connected, for example, to Facebook and would know about every new feature. And if you manage to have a really good relationship with them, and so it's something that should be like for a long term, not an external partner that you would want to switch every month or two, but it really should be like a long-term relationship where you can share with each other your successes and best practices, and that way both sides really gain from this partnership, and you can always stay through this partner attached to everything that's happening in the market, to trends, and it's really a win-win situation.
Cool, guys. Maybe last question before we give the audience a chance. I'm keen to know how you see 2015, let's say in a UA perspective. Any new features, any new trends?
So first of all, it's not a secret that during 2014 CPIs increased significantly on all channels. And I think one of the trends of 2015 would be ASO, trying to invest money in ASO in order to bring organic installs. So I'm hearing more and more companies that are ASO is an App Store optimization, so that would be the SEO of mobile. And a lot of people are started to talk about it during 2014, but not many actually started to practice it. So I'm definitely confident that in 2015 more companies would start working on it and improve their app store pages and everything that includes the ASO best practices. Other than that, there are some new tools out there that can significantly make user acquisition managers' life easier. One of them is Grow Mobile, and they just started running during the end of 2014, but they allow the user acquisition managers to work directly with them and not directly with several networks. So by using tools like that are more sophisticated, like RoMobile, you can have a smaller team that will manage several networks and optimize them, but you won't have to have like the headache of working with each network on a day-to-day basis. So I think that new tools in 2015 are definitely something that we're going to see. A lot of companies are understanding that mobile is not easy and user acquisition is a difficult task, and companies are trying to see what they can do to help out.
I think 2015, one of the things that's going to grow quite a lot is video advertising on all in-app videos, YouTube, influencers, even maybe at some point go to smart TV and so on, and like Adam probably is going to talk about, TV advertising as well. There are a lot more tools that are available right now where you can start measuring these things, measuring not just the views and clicks, but also post-install events. It's still a bit kind of surface level, but a lot better than it was before. And you know, with all of these video, more engaged, rich media, you can kind of get more users that are really interested in your game. So they would watch the video, and the download would be genuine.
So I think that 2015 is going to be an interesting year. I think if any of you guys watched the charts in 2014, there wasn't a whole lot of movement in terms of top grossing. I think there was only 1 or 2 new games that actually entered into the market. Most companies, myself included, launched games that were unsuccessful, and it was sort of a holding pattern for a lot of people. And I think that 2015, I think people are starting to wake up to the power of outside CPI advertising. So we mentioned TV, influencers, all of these additional channels, because in the end, the only way, and you guys are going to see this, to increase your traffic on CPI is to pay more money. Sometimes you can get a little bit better with creative and ASO, but the reality is that your CPI is directly linked to the volume of traffic you buy. That being said, when you take external factors like print media, TV, other campaigns which exist outside the application, these work to greatly affect your CPIs and your general engagement within the application. So I think companies are sort of waking up to the idea of, hey, maybe mobile isn't this new amazing medium, and maybe we should actually go back to the historical stuff of print and TV, which we all poo-pooed for the last 4 years, saying we're something new and amazing.
Actually, I've had a lot of more questions to ask you guys, but I think it's fair enough to leave the audience some time to ask their questions. So feel free to ask, if any of you have. Yeah.
Hey, so we're like a smaller developer, and we can't afford to experiment with each ad network to see which one is best. So can you recommend like a trustworthy third-party marketing company that can work with us? I mean,
How big is your budget?
depends. I mean, up to maybe 300,000.
So I think that getting a good mixture, I mean, that's a decent amount of money to spend. I mean, anything over $100,000 is going to give you enough money to test, at least for 2 or 3 months, if you've done it wisely. So if it's your first game, my recommendation personally, Facebook. Just go to the place where you're going to get the best quality traffic, benchmark, find out what's going on there. And there are a lot of companies that will do that for you. Obviously, if you can hire somebody who knows how to run Facebook marketing, better. But these guys are, a lot of people in this show, the people standing to my left, they're good at what they do and they can help you.
Can you give me some names?
Yeah.
But not really ad networks or Tune or something.
Marketing companies.
Well, for a gaming company, Chartboost can be a very good channel, but you have to be very hands-on. You have to make sure to optimize their traffic on a, let's say, almost daily base. The great thing about it is that all of their publishers are games, but they have a very long tail of smaller indie developers. So you have to see what works out for you. The CPIs would be relatively low, so they would be like lower than what you can get on Facebook.
How about not working with an ad network, like working with somebody who work with 100 ad networks and they just advise us and just pay them something?
Yeah, I mean, there's companies like Somo, Grow Mobile. I mean, these are all agencies that basically have that entire setup in-house. So the thing for you is you just got to go find out who you feel comfortable working with, do a search for agencies in mobile, and you're going to get 100 of them. We worked directly with Somo. They worked really well for us. Eventually, we moved them on and took everything in-house. But a company like that can definitely give you that kickstart.
I think there's one more thing. Ted is sitting here actually. You can get installs through their platform. They trade. It's a installs trading platform. You basically don't pay dollars, but exchange installs with someone else. So maybe you can work something out. Oh, the tap deck. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's
Tell Mary, raise your hand so everybody can see you. Cool.
I have a question about how you credit cross-promoted users. So if you're pushing somebody from one game to the other, and that user then has a positive activity in the second game, are you crediting that activity to the CPI that you might have spent on the initial game, or is it lowering your costs on your second game?
I think it's lowering the cost overall as moving liquidity meaning users from one app to another, but I wouldn't include it into CPI costs or anything like that. So let's say if we launch a new game and we plan to spend, I don't know, 100,000, 200, whatever, that wouldn't be included into that. We wouldn't make it a blended CPI. Every company does it differently, so it depends case by case really, but in Miniclip we don't do it. So everything that's cross-promo, our own IPs, so that means we're moving one user from another, especially when the games are in a similar genre, that doesn't count towards CPI.
If cross-promotion is a significant part of your strategy, then you definitely should include it, in my opinion, in your CPI. If you're one of the companies that creates an app every month or so, so you really can value the traffic that you get from one app to another, you should definitely include it. You can see how it goes with a few apps and try to predict the percentage of users that you will be able to cross-promote, and by that you can calculate the CPI that you're willing to pay.
Just one thing, we don't add it to CPI, but we do add that traffic to our LTV cost. That's how we do it. And yeah, it's not directly into CPI, but if the LTV cost works out overall from cross-promo, organic traffic, and everything else that's paid, then it becomes blended. Yes, that's true.
Another question?
How successful do you find Facebook for getting installs in the Middle East or Eastern Europe? That's one question. I have another question afterwards.
Facebook is quite good actually, and it's been very good recently. I've tried it in the past in a previous company where I worked, but it was kind of not really there. I don't think there weren't that many users using Facebook actively at that time. But right now in Middle East, didn't go to Russia though, but in Middle East it works quite well. One thing, CPI is quite low still, and the in-app purchases are there. Pretty good, depending like case by case scenario, so depending on the game, if they like it, if it's localized, whatever. But the return on investment is pretty good. And one more thing, there's a high split between iOS and Android devices, so make sure you're on both platforms, because Android there is massive.
Are there particular countries in the Middle East that you would target?
What's your game?
We have a shooting game.
I wouldn't take your game to the Middle East.
I'll tell you after.
No, definitely. I would say that the Russian market is getting more and more relevant to use Facebook as an advertising platform. Definitely see more and more users engage with that platform.
And my second question was about re-engagement and retargeting. So a bunch of you guys talked about using email. Do you guys have a tool that you use for email? How do you manage that, and how do you go about using it to get those users back into the game?
Sure. I mean, there are a lot of email providers out there. We use SurveyMonkey, and you basically set up the email like you'd set up a push notification strategy. time in game. You can pull all that event data or push that to your email provider, your ISP, and you just have to make sure that it's in line with the rest of the strategies that you have. So I mentioned SurveyMonkey, there's iContact, there's hundreds of email providers out there that will allow you to run email marketing, and that strategy, as I mentioned, should just fall in line with your normal strategy of re-engagement or continuous contact with those players. Sales, you've reached this event, you haven't come back, share this, promotional codes, all of those things.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm just building on that. I just hear a lot of talk about lots of different ways of like segmenting and this sort of cohort analysis and stuff, and then that sounds great, but that's all going to be programmed. That's going to be built into the game. Are there any tools that you use that allow you to do all this kind of data analysis, ideally free?
Free. Well, do you know SQL?
I do.
Then building a SQL database, I mean, that's probably the best thing to do, is just to have your own database. It doesn't have to be programmatic. A lot of these tools in general you can just upload IDFA batch files or email addresses or whatever based on the cohorts that you pull on an automatic basis. So if you know how to run SQL, there are some very good systems that can be based off of that. Free, not so sure, but you've got a company like Chart.io, which is basically a layman's tool for SQL, which you can run automatic queries based on your database. There's companies like Optimove, which would give you these files, basically also plugging you into your push notification system, like, I don't know, any of the numbers, Urban Airship or Epoxy. But all of this stuff is gonna cost you money. I mean, there are some systems which are cheaper than others, and if you're a small developer, those costs might be $1,000 a month. It might seem like a lot, but you may, in the end, get that value back in the money that these players spend.
Okay, I would like to thank my colleague. Oh, sorry, Sai. Okay, go ahead. I
SQL
guess.
is fine, but you would need some data engineering background to build that system behind, because that's what we did at Miniclip, and it works pretty well. From free ones, can you implement Facebook SDK and look at the app insights? There is a cohort analysis been released recently. It's pretty good. Still, to have to build your own is better, and to have paid version is better, but it's a good start. And it's totally free, you don't have to pay anything.
So now we really need to end this conversation. Thanks, guys, for joining and sharing from your experience and know-how. And thank you all for coming. You've definitely been my favorite crowd ever. Feel free to reach out to each one of us to ask more questions if you have.
Okay, thank you very much.